Permission to grieve. Permission to allow your husband understand the depths of your grief. Permission to give your children the ability to understand that grief sometimes hurts far longer than we expect or want it to. Permission to continue being a mother and a career person through this debilitating grief. Holding yourself together just long enough to get through each day to then end up crying at night on your own. These are some of the things that Jere Weber talks about in her podcast interview after the suicide of her father that she took on the blame for. You'll find out a little bit more about her story and why she did this, and also how difficult it was for her and her family to get through the 5 years after her dad's suicide, and the book that came out of her experience in her plight to try and help other people to come to terms with some of the difficult emotions and discussions that hopefully do come out after such an event.
Have you ever had one of those gut-wrenching moments where life ground you to your knees and you found yourself asking in despair, why me? This podcast is all about sharing your stories and journeys, from asking why me to declaring this is why me. Discover how ordinary human beings like you and I have found their extraordinary levels of hope, courage, compassion, and provided a new perspective for greater potential and self-empowerment during their darkest defining moment. As a creative artist and coach myself, my guests and I discuss the interconnectedness of emotion and transformation in those moments, and how their actions then seize the opportunity for discovering their unfiltered and authentic voice, and ultimately their life's purpose. I invite you to join me each week as we share insights into how adversity can be turned into a unique advantage. Today's guest is Jere Weber, co-founder of Next Level Couples with her husband Shane Weber. Jere is here today to discuss her WhyMe moment as it relates to a topic that unfortunately touches many more people than perhaps some of us may realise. She is the author of Sacred Nightmare, Memoirs and Movement for Adult Children of Parental Suicide. Welcome to the WhyMe podcast, Jere.
Thank you, Vera. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, so tell me a little bit about your story and your WhyMe moment where essentially your world changed.
Yeah, so in 2014, my dad took his life, and we didn't really see it coming. My mom had passed away 2 years previously, and at that time was when I saw Dad's mental health decline. And he came to live with us immediately, and just kind of became part of our everyday life and family. But there were definitely things that happened that I realize in hindsight that I wish I had been more alert to during. And that was one of my aha moments in the whole thing, was just realizing how blindsided we can be sometimes by our family. Especially, I'm a trained marriage and family therapist. And so I think I'm even more hard on myself that I didn't maybe do some things that I should have done. And so I felt a great deal of blame, like I killed my father, was really what plagued me for about 5 years. I couldn't think about what had happened because I was so terrified. I was in denial for about 5 years, and it was very difficult for me to think about Dad or to think about what had happened. I really felt like if I did, I was going to die too, and I felt like I should. I felt like I should. I don't have any right to live. I don't have a right to enjoy my family. I don't have a right to succeed. I just felt utterly to blame. I'm an only child, so it was all on me. And I've kind of come through that now, and I think I had to, you kind of have to hit rock bottom. And I wouldn't say that I wasn't suicidal myself. I knew that Heavenly Father, God would not want me to take my life, even though I felt like I didn't deserve to have a life. But I was just not functioning well. I was not functioning well at all. I worked as a therapist, but I didn't want to go to work. I didn't want to get out of bed. When I came home, I would go straight to bed and just cover myself in my covers. And I didn't interact with my family. And I was just having nervous breakdowns and I was not functioning well. And so I told my husband finally, hey, you need to make an appointment for me to go see a therapist. I did not have the strength or the wherewithal to do that myself. So I gave it to him. And for whatever reason, and I understand, I really do, it took him 6 months to set that appointment.
He himself, and I think he had to come to terms with, my wife isn't well. And that was hard for him because I'm a vibrant, go-getter, independent, extremely independent woman. And for him to admit that there was something wrong with me was hard. Just like it was hard for me to admit that something was wrong with my dad, And so eventually we got myself to a therapist and I got some help. And I still had this dreadful feeling that I was going to die because I did not deserve to live. I felt like I was responsible for my dad's death. And so it wasn't until I went to my bishop and talked to him, and I just said, Bishop, I think I killed my father. And poor guy, he just didn't even know where that came from. He wasn't prepared. He didn't know what to say. But he was patient, and he sat with me and walked me through it and reassured me that I wasn't to blame. And I had heard that, but I think I needed to hear it from a spiritual leader.
Right.
Because of my faith, I am so committed, and I feel strongly about my relationship with Heavenly Father and Jesus Christ. And I just knew that I needed to hear from somebody who I give authority to. I give authority to the bishop to tell me things and to guide me. And I needed to hear that from him. And I think when I was leaving the meeting, I expected this big weight to be lifted off my shoulders, and it wasn't. I did feel a peace. I felt a comfort, but I still felt that heavy, heavy blanket, wet blanket feeling on me, like I just couldn't move. And it was in that time that I really felt God telling me, you need to put your faith in me, not anybody else. Trust in me that I hear you. I understand you. I am aware of what you're going through. And I'm also aware of your father and what he has gone through, and he's okay. And I just needed that moment. I'm sorry if I start crying, but I needed that reassurance.
Yeah.
So that I could feel like it was okay for me to be a mom and to enjoy my family and to enjoy my career, because I had given up. I even told Shane, I have no right. I have no right to have happiness in this life. So I will do the things that I have to do, but I have no right to be happy. And he just couldn't understand where I was coming from. And so I didn't even understand myself what was going on. But and until I had that moment, kind of after talking with my bishop and talking with God, I felt finally, okay, I need to allow him to help me, because I just felt like I was trying to somehow fix this all on my own. And of course I couldn't.
Yeah, I think you bring up some very, very emotive moments and thoughts that so many of our viewers will relate to. And when you said that you needed to hear the message from someone who you trust, someone who you give authority to,
Mm-hmm.
And also when you explained that you are a counselor yourself, and yet here you were helping other people and struggling so much yourself. I think that dichotomy is so important for people to speak about, because so many people go through that. So many people are hurting on the inside, and grief, you know, the first stage of grief is that denial. This isn't happening. This is not happening. And so you can't progress to the next stage until you deal with that denial. And I'm just feeling so much energy from you right now. That was a long time. I mean, 5 years is a very long time to be in denial of this. So having gone through that moment, has your shift happened internally yourself for feeling that blame for what happened?
Yeah, it has. So what I started doing after I was wrestling with myself, I started writing things down. And they started out as journal entries, or I would just jot things in a notebook, whatever I had nearby. And then I realized I need to write this. I really need to write this down. And so I started writing. And you know, you mentioned the stages of grief, and me being in denial for so long. I felt like the rest of the stages were just boom, 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 and washing over me and hitting me so fast. And I was trying to, you know, kind of find my footing in all of that. So when I started writing, really writing, like I need to make a book out of this kind of writing, it took me to some really dark places that I had not been before. And it was scary. It was uncomfortable. I was facing things that I didn't want to face, that I had been blocking out. And I was reliving it all over again. And so, you know, re-traumatizing my mind and my body. My hair started falling out. It was very traumatic all over again. And so I put it down and I didn't want to touch it. I just said, oh no, this is awful. I'm not doing this anymore. But then again, I had a prompting, you know, from Heavenly Father saying, you've got to finish this, Sheree. You've got to do this for other people. This isn't about you anymore. And I just thought, oh, I can't. I don't want to. I don't have the energy. I'm barely hanging on. And he said, you're going to find a way. Start talking to other people. And so it was at that point that I started reaching out through groups and associations and just point blank asking people. You know, it's not a common question that you can ask people, and it's very sensitive, and I felt very awkward asking, but I did get some responses, and there were people that wanted to share their story, and I just guard those like they're precious gold. They're so important, and these folks, they agreed to let me publish them and to talk about them. And I just appreciated so candidly the way they shared their stories. And one of the interesting things is they told me at the end of the interviews, they said, it's been years since anybody asked me to talk about this. I feel so good. You know, they told me that they felt good being able to talk about it because they hold it so close to their heart. And it's not just something that you talk about. It's very hard to talk about. And for them to share so personally the way they did, I was very respectful around how I published the interviews, and I sent them back to them to make sure they read it and added any corrections or anything that they wanted to, so they knew exactly what would be said. And now it's in the book. And it was a very special bonding moment for me. It was healing for me to hear their accounts as well. I would cry as we were interviewing. I would cry too. And we just understood. We understood each other in that moment. And a part of me realized, gosh, wouldn't it be nice if there was like a group that we could kind of get together and visit but yet I don't know. It's so hard to talk about. I don't know that we would do good in a group format. I know that there are groups, and it is helpful. I do believe in the power of groups. Maybe I'm not ready for a group. Maybe that's where that's coming from. I don't know. Yeah, but so that's kind of where the transformation happened for me. Was when I started to write and I wanted to give up. But then I felt prompted that this isn't about you. This isn't for you anymore. This has got to be bigger than you. You need to go talk to other people and help other people. And that's what would get me out of bed some days when I was still having those down days and didn't want to get up and go. I did get excited about the book, and I said, okay, I will get up and continue this work because somebody out there needs it.
Yeah.
And that's what kind of transformed me. I think when we get outside of ourselves and serve others, because this was like a service to others, it got me past my own junk, my own grief. And it's not that I wasn't dealing with it, because I was staring it in the face as I was writing this book. But it helped me to know that I was doing this for other people and not for myself, because myself was not enough, you know?
Yes, I do know. And I love the fact that you recognize that, because so many people who have why me moments in that introspection, in that moment of being with themselves, if they can get to that point of accepting who they are, they can often realize that, in fact, it is not all about them. It is about how they can serve and provide for others. And I know that I found my purpose and what I'm good at doing, and allowing sharing my story has opened up the door for so many people. And my experiences with domestic violence, and particularly with sexual assault, again, it's a topic that a lot of people deny. They're trying to deal with it. They're hurting, and they don't know how to start those conversations. And so having someone like yourself being able to start that conversation, it gives people that permission that it's okay, that what you're feeling is valid, that what you have to say is valid, that your experience is valid. And that, in fact, healing often starts at that point when we can share our story.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And I had some people tell me that in their interviews, that they felt like they were scary, like their story was scary. And so they took on kind of a scary persona themselves, like they couldn't share because then they would scare other people. They would scare people away. Some of them even had family members tell them, don't tell anybody anything, you know, this is private, this is bad. And so it's very harmful at times. You know, sometimes people mean well, or out of their own fear or ignorance, put that on us. And the truth is, yes, our story is scary, but if we can kind of own that and know that, but we're okay, we're going to share this and help others, and we're not doing it to scare anybody else. We're doing it to connect and validate, because sometimes the most validating thing is just to hear, I understand, I've been there too, or some similar situation. That way you don't feel so alone. And like you have done something incredibly wrong to have brought this on you somehow. That's not it. And sometimes you just need to hear somebody else say, I've been through it too.
Yeah, it is so powerful when you are around other people, and everybody's experience is going to be different. And everybody's going to process that different, the same way we all process grief differently. Having that commonality, though, that is where the power of that tribe, if you like, your group, that is the power of that sharing. And it's the power of that knowing and the feeling that you get even being in proximity with people, you know. And we are across the globe, and I've got tears. We are across the other side of the globe, yet I can feel, you know, that immense strength courage.
Thank you. Yeah.
There is
Thank
so
you.
much behind what you're doing. And quite often it's that little compassionate push that we need to get started. And you are providing that to people. I mean, with your book, it's opening that conversation. It's a beautiful thing to offer.
I have a very hard time, other than a dedicated subject like we're talking about today, I have a very hard time talking about my book in general. And I even tell people, you don't want to read it. You don't want to read my book unless you've been in some situation like this, or you are a professional wanting to further help others in this position, or you are a family member wanting to better understand, or if suicide has affected you in some way in your life and you want some more insight, then this book would be insightful for you. It is for the person who has been through the suicide of their parent, because they'll find the comfort in that. Otherwise, I think it's a very sad book. But there's hope in it. There's hope, and there's practical application in the end. I don't just, dump all over people.
Yes.
I want to, provide some actual help and insight. And there's definitely lots of that. But I just hesitate sometimes telling people about the book, because I just feel, again, I still feel that identity of my story is scary and trying to get past that. So I'm not by any means over the hill, but I'm trying to find strength and a way to help and serve through it. Right. And I will continue to grow and learn and try to contribute in a meaningful way. I think that's how we get through stuff like this. When we have harsh, traumatic adversities, that almost becomes our new responsibility, or our new commitment is then, well, now I can go and help others. I need to go and help others who have been through this, because we're all just trying to help one another through this life. And some of us have different skill sets. Some of us have different resources. And this just happens to be a different resource that we have because of the traumatic event that we've been through.
Yeah.
You can turn it into a resource, or you can turn it into a brick around your neck. Which would you prefer?
Yes, absolutely. I mean, that weight, that burden, it is a difficult realization that you can choose not to carry it. It's difficult because when we have been carrying it, to realize that we've had that choice, that's hard, because we realize we've put ourselves through perhaps a longer period of that weight holding us down. Yeah.
And sometimes we might be a little indignant and say, I can hear the people saying, well, how dare you say that I'm choosing to hold this? And
Yes.
I gently say, I understand.
Yes.
I compassionately say, I understand that too. We progress through things at our own pace and at our own rate. And it's not that we choose to hold on to stuff. At some point, though, we have to choose to move forward.
Correct.
We have to choose to be an agent in our life, right? And however that looks to you. So that's an important piece to know. I'm empathetic, very empathetic to that feeling of, but I can't just be happy all of a sudden. I can't just, shake this off. No, absolutely not. It's not that easy. And there's still days when I cry at night. I try not to wake up my husband, but it just hits me, and all I can do is just cry. And then I have my cry, and I can go to sleep. Yeah. And it's just going to be that way. And I've accepted that these are moments, and I'm going to embrace them. I'm going to acknowledge them. And then I'm going to say, okay, that was that. And now I'm going to continue on with my work.
Yeah. And I love that you're sharing your journey. I love that you're not waiting until you're, if you like, healed from this, because this is an ongoing process, as you said, and allowing people to share this journey with you allows them to be freer in their journey and their travel through this as well. And as you said, to feel understood.
I like that. I like that very much. The part about, healing is a process, and no, I would never have written the book if I waited until I was healed, because what is completely healed? What is that going to look like? I think we carry some of the sadness and the memories with us as a reminder of what we've gone through and what we've overcome and who we have become as a result. And in a way, honoring what happened and why. Why did, the whole why me? Why did this happen? Well, who did you become as a result?
That's a really powerful statement right there. Who did you become as a result? Because we can get stuck in the why me moment, and there's not always an answer. And when we're talking about suicide, we do not always get that closure. We do not always get that answer. So it's a very important part of that process to be able to be working through and beyond that.
Yeah, I agree.
Wow. I'm so aware of the impact that you sharing even this small part of your story with the audience is going to have. And I'm aware that there's going to be a lot of tears when people listen to this. And I've always been one to embrace those tears. And you talk about those nights where you still cry.
Yeah.
I'm curious, however, why did you mention about trying not to allow your husband to hear that?
That's still part of my independent side, I think, Vera.
Okay.
I've never been the type to easily share. And I think that has a lot to do with my emotional maturity as well. I'm growing. I'm still learning, even though I'm in my 40s. But it's difficult for me to share what I'm feeling unless it's a happy feeling.
Okay.
Right? I can share joy and I'm proud of my children. It's very difficult for me to share that I'm having a hard time. But that is something I've learned through this process as well, as far as including my family. I have learned that I have to let my children see me cry. I have to let my children know why I'm crying. And a lot of times I wrote this book late in the wee hours of the night because, family life is going on during the day. And so I would be up until like 3 o'clock in the morning writing this book. And sometimes I would have one of my children, they would just kind of peek around the corner at me. And every time I wrote, I cried. It was such an emotionally draining experience. And so they would look at me and I'd shake my head and say, yeah, I'm sad. Mama is sad. She's writing about Grandpa. And they would, come and hug me or kiss me or just hold me while I typed. They wouldn't let me go. So I started typing again. And it was important for me. And I talk about this somewhat in the book. I give permission to my children to grieve. I give permission to myself to talk to them about grief. I still struggle with giving myself permission to talk about it. Right. So I try to make it very okay for them to say whatever they need to say. And I somehow compartmentalize. I don't know how that works in our human psyche, but I compartmentalize for them, for their sake. But I've been learning I have to show them how to go through this grieving process, because what if something happens in their life, and not what if, something will happen in their life. And I need to be an example to them of how to do this in a healthy way, right? They need some basis, because if they have nothing, then they're floundering. And I don't want that for them. I want to give them the gift of how to grieve, how to share, how to connect around it.
Yeah, that's right. And as parents, that is part of what we're doing with our children. We're showing them that in vulnerability, there is strength, right? And that being able to be vulnerable is a strength in itself. And as you said, having that guard up, it doesn't just apply to our family and the people in our inner circle. It applies to ourselves as well. And sometimes that guard we put up within ourselves, to ourselves, is the hardest one to break through.
Yes. Yes, it is.
I'm going to share a little story with you about one of my vulnerable states and the lesson that my son learnt from it. And I had severe asthma and at the time severe undiagnosed vocal cord dysfunction. So I was hypoxic and blue most of the time. And yet I'd recently left my abusive husband. I had started a business to be able to keep food on the table. And I was working very, very long hours. And my child was learning how to read in the same office on my second computer. He was teaching himself how to read, and he was only about 4 at this point, and very, very talented young little boy. And each night we would go to bed and I would try to read him a bedtime story. But as my condition got worse, I got to the point where I could barely speak without coughing and spluttering and needing to go on my machines.
Yeah.
And what happened one night, which changed everything for me, and it became the norm, was that here I was sitting up in bed with him, and he bought me a book that he wanted to have read. And he wasn't the sort of child that would have those, normal picture books you read to kids. He would like to have stories, perhaps that adult children would read. And so I would start to read, and I just couldn't do it. And my face was just covered in tears. And he recognized, even at that age, he recognized that feeling and that immense emotion. And he looked up at me. And I mean, he's here in, just in that little armpit space. And he's looking up at me and he says, "Mummy, why are you crying?" And I tried to get out, because I'm your mum and I'm supposed to be able to read you this story. This is part of what I do as a mum. I'm teaching you how to read, and I'm teaching all these things. And he grabbed the book and he said, "I'll read it to you." And to my absolute surprise, he sat there, and sure, he got stuck on some of the bigger words, but he just started to read, and he said, "I read you the story now. You can't read me the story, so I read it to you." He said, "I'll be the mummy." And I just lost it at that point.
Oh, my goodness.
And then he says, "But Mummy, why are you crying?" And it was
still crying.
Yeah, still crying and crying more. And it was because you are so beautiful. And what I didn't recognize in that moment, that I recognized later looking back, and hindsight is a wonderful lesson, teacher, was that I was teaching him compassion. I was teaching him independence. And he was teaching me to learn to receive. As a parent, our children can teach us so much. And the people and the experiences, even when they're so difficult, can give us so much if we are open to receive.
That is so important, Vera. That is exactly right. We can be blessed immensely if we just humble ourselves enough to allow others to give to us, to pour into us, even if it comes from our sweet, precious babies. Because don't they have the biggest hearts? They are so adaptable and so keen and in tune to what we're going through. And they give in the only way they know how to give. Their big hugs and kisses. And what a special, special boy to say, "Mommy, I'll read to you now."
It's Vera-Lee from Australia, the founder of the WhyMe Movement and podcast. Well, one idea, one vision, one person. This self-funded podcast and movement has started to take a life of its own, which is exactly where I had planned it would be. To hear the stories of the far-reaching impact across many countries in this world, it humbles me to know that my vision is shared, understood, and positively influencing people to look at the changes they can make for their own adversity and how they can find the strength, the courage to be inspired and feel connected and empowered to use their adversity to their advantage. One of the best ways that you can help support the WhyMe movement and podcast is to subscribe to the various channels, such as the podcast platform you are listening to this on now and the YouTube channel, which has much bonus content released. By subscribing, you will make sure that you are one of the first to find out who is coming up next, more about our guests, and the interesting questions that I ask them, which do not get released on the podcast platforms, and lots of other good bonus content. I always love reading your comments, and so please feel free to leave them on each of the platforms. The beauty of social media is that you can easily share single episodes or any of that bonus content from YouTube onto your own social media platform with your friends, which helps to bring this positive, inspiring message to far more people, allowing you to be an active participant in the WhyMe movement and vision. On Apple Podcasts, it always makes a big difference if you can leave a rating, review, and subscribe to the show. Let's get back to today's story. Yeah, and those are those moments as a parent, I find they're the ones that let you know you're doing the right thing. You know, everything is going to be okay. They're those reassurances that the universe, that God gives us, that we're on the right track. And those lessons, those life lessons are being learned. And we're developing that trust and trust in ourselves, trust in each other, and trust in that process.
Yes. Thank you for sharing that.
Oh, you're welcome. So I would really like to know how that group environment, how you're looking at setting that up and trying to foster that environment for people to have the permission and have that trust in each other and that safe space to share their stories.
Well, I honestly, I have not set up a group because I don't know that I'm ready for that. At the end of my book, I talk a little bit about my hope is that those that read the book will share in their journey through this process. It's never about being completely done, but I just ask that they share in their own way and contribute in their own way, whatever that looks like for them, whatever they feel comfortable sharing and contributing, because that's empowering on an individual level and a macro level. When people who have gone through severe trial and trauma and they get their voice again, they find their voice and they find their sense of self. They're powerful. They are powerful. And that may come through in writing, that may come through in music, that may come through in their cooking. Whatever their strength is, they tend to pour into that. And that's how I ask that, people share their stories, is just go out there and live your best life. Because we start improving communities and society, I think, at the family level, at the individual level. Kindness begins with me. Humility begins with me. And as we share that and share our gifts and talents in a way that helps others, I really feel like we'll strengthen ourselves and those around us.
Yes, that's right. And as you said, understanding that concept of who you are and really knowing and owning it. Sometimes these are the experiences in our lives that help us find our voice, that perhaps we might not have had this not happened. And as awful as whatever it is, whatever trauma, whatever event has happened, to have us in that space.
Right.
To be able to make something beautiful out of something awful, it means so much. And I know that for me, my communication is mainly in the visual arts methods. So my pieces of artwork, every single one, is about a moment in time, a shared experience, a journey. It's all part of a large body of work, and I pour everything into each piece that I do, and I understand that process. I also understand how emotionally draining that can be. And
Yes.
you talk a lot about the emotional drain and the crying and the tears in writing. And I often am the same way with my pieces of work. There is so much into them. And I believe that that is why when people read your book, when people see my work, they get it without the explanation, because there is so much behind that. There is so much knowing, and there is so much of this is a journey. This is not an end destination. This is something that we're not alone in. We all experience and travel these paths, and people will come in and join us at different points of that journey, and they will leave at different points, and that's okay, because, you know, we all have people come in at the right times for us.
Right. I like that sentiment. People come in at different points along the journey to touch our life for a moment, and some stay and some just come for that brief time and then leave. But their impact remains.
Correct.
I like that sentiment. I do.
Yeah. It's something that personally I've experienced in many times over, many different ways. I was involved in a number of support groups for domestic violence and sexual assault. I did a lot of art therapy work, and all of this took place in a group setting. And there was a very important reason why. And even the women who weren't ready to share yet, and I was one of them who couldn't at that point in time speak the atrocities that I'd gone through. And yet I put them out in my work, to the point where we had a group exhibition and my work was denied being shown in public because it was considered too confrontational.
Oh.
And so the art therapist facilitator and myself would go around to these places and confront them as to why they were not willing to show this work, and to try and change that culture that, yes, it is scary. Yes, to know that this has happened is difficult and confrontational. However, is keeping it locked up in the cupboard going to help anyone else? That was an important conversation to have, and it meant so much to me. And in fact, I learned to realise that having my work denied meant that I was doing exactly what I needed to be doing, because I was getting that message out there, and it helped me to get to the point where I could verbalise what happened. And I witnessed so many of those women in that space learning and observing and growing, and they often don't engage, but it's all happening internally, and those changes are occurring. And then one day they will say something. One day they will get the courage to say, you know what, today is my day that I share. And that is such a powerful thing to be a part of. And I really love what you've done in going through that experience to write this book, to share and to bring this message to so many people. How can people get a copy of your book?
It is on Amazon. Do you have Amazon there?
Yes, we do.
Okay. Yeah, it's on Amazon right now. It's in ebook format and paper book format. The publisher told me today that it'll take about 5 days to link, whatever that means, and then it should be up and going. So, but the ebook is available right now.
Wonderful.
And when I get the courage up, I'll do an audiobook as well.
Wonderful.
That's going to take some time.
Yes, I can imagine that is a whole different level. Writing it in your own space and time, putting your voice to it, although that's going to be so difficult for you doing it, please know that for people listening to your story from your voice will mean so much to them.
Even if I cry?
Even if you cry. Even if you cry. And that is something that I learned through sharing my story. When I used to share it, when I was very close to it. See, I'm got the tears going again. Tears are wonderful, and I learned to embrace them What I didn't like was when I was still very close to it, that I would start to tell my story. And I was speaking to premiers and all sorts of people, because once I found my voice, I knew the power of it and the importance of the message, and that I was rare because so many people were not able to share and articulate, and also the flow-on effects afterwards. And so I used to share my story, but often I would be so distraught still that I'd be and unable to actually get my message out.
Yes, yes.
And so having gone through the healing process, and as you said, it's always a journey, I'm still connected to that. So the tears still flow, and yet I'm able to continue talking through it. And I love that the audience can hear that emotion, because that is so important, because that's what they're feeling. And so that helps, again, for them to relate to this experience and to know they're not alone. Somebody understands. There are so many of us out there who understand on that level, and that gives them permission to have that release as well. So you're giving so many people a gift and an opportunity. Thank you.
Well, thank you for sharing with me as well. I appreciate that. And thank you for being brave and starting this podcast and being a voice for change and for encouragement and hope.
Yeah, it's something that for me, it's been in the works for a very long time, perhaps not in a podcast format. However, I realized the opportunity was there, and I'm running with it because everybody's stories are so important. And I've always said, everyone has a story if you're there to listen. And I provide that opportunity to listen. And now to provide that opportunity to people all across the globe, because it doesn't matter which country you're in. We are all going to have these common feelings and emotions and events that we're touched by. And it's so important to honor that and to share that. As I said, it gives people permission. And I realized many times in my own adversity through health issues and recovering from what I went through, that is so important. It is a gift both to yourself and to others to be able to do that.
I agree.
Thank you so much, Jeray.
Thank you for having me, Vera. Thank you for sharing. I appreciate you letting me come on.
You're welcome. Well, another story, more WhyMe moments, and more reasons to feel inspired to change your adversity into your advantage. An integral part of the vision of the WhyMe movement is the ICE acronym, I's for Inspire. When you feel inspired, you are more likely to take action. C is for two things, actually. Connection. You are not alone in this world. There are always people here who want to help you get through your adversity and feel positive about your life and your purpose. It is also for courage. Courage, in my opinion, is feeling the fear and doing it anyway. And there lies the importance of connection. For sometimes we don't feel we have the courage to do things on our own. And yet once we have the emotional support of those people who we trust, it can help us to feel that fear and do it anyway. And lastly, the E is for empower. When we have that connection and the courage and the inspiration to know, get our clarity of purpose, well, that is when we feel empowered to take the action that we want to do to change some aspect of our lives for the better. If you would like my personal support in this area to help you get through adversity in your life, you can contact me at Vera-Lee Original on social media.